My son-in-law leaned back in my leather recliner, the same chair my late wife bought me for my 50th birthday, and with a smirk that made my stomach turn, he said, "Old man, you'll die broke anyway." Friends, before I tell you what I did next, make sure you subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. This story, it's not just about betrayal. It's about justice, about patience, and about the moment when the tables finally turn. Not the millions I earned building my small construction company from nothing. Not the houses, not even the lakefront cabin I spent summers restoring with my late wife, Ellen. But the truth, the title deed still bore my name. I had given them the run of the house after Margaret, my wife of 43 years, passed away. The grief had swallowed me whole, and the house felt too large, too full of ghosts. Daniel had asked if he and Claire could move in, just until they found something of their own. Of course I agreed. That was 2 years ago. Now, I was more guest than master in my own home. I still remember when Daniel was little, how he'd run barefoot across the polished wooden floors, his toy planes buzzing through the hallways. Margaret and I used to sit on the balcony with lemonade, watching him race down the driveway with the neighbor kids. He was our pride, our miracle after years of trying. But somewhere along the way, something broke. He married Claire, beautiful, sharp-tongued Claire, who knew how to smile at people while measuring what they could offer her. Henry would laugh about me, sitting on assets that could be put to better use. They'd pat my back, smile, and then drop comments about nursing homes or how I couldn't take it with me when I go. I ignored it, or pretended to. Then one Sunday afternoon, they arrived together, something they rarely did. They brought along a neatly dressed man with glasses and a briefcase. A lawyer, they said, for estate planning. I had paid for that bracelet when she cornered me with teary eyes, saying it was for their anniversary. Dinner ended with wine. Too much wine. That's when Claire joked about the old man still squatting upstairs. Her friends laughed. Daniel didn't defend me. And then, with that smirk, my son-in-law leaned close and said the words that branded themselves into my chest. "Old man, you'll die broke anyway. Might as well hand over the house now." For a moment the room went silent. My grandson, just 10 years old, shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at me with wide, uncertain eyes. Even he knew something wasn't right. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I finally understood. They thought I had nothing left. They thought my retirement savings had dried up, that I was clinging to the past, clinging to this mansion because it was all I had. What they didn't know was that 3 months earlier, I had signed papers with a buyer. A wealthy couple from New York had already put down a deposit for the house. And the closing date? It was only weeks away. I had stayed silent, letting them play their game, letting them laugh, letting them believe. But now it was time to watch their little empire crumble. As I excused myself from the table, I heard Claire whisper, "Why does he even stay here? He should be in a nursing home." My heart pounded, not from hurt anymore, but from the fire of resolve. I walked down the long corridor, my footsteps echoing off marble floors, and entered my study. On the desk sat the folder, the contract of sale, neatly bound, waiting for the lawyer's call. That night, I stared at it for hours. Margaret's photograph sat beside the lamp, her kind smile steady, her eyes full of warmth. "They've forgotten who built this house," I whispered, "but they'll remember." And that's when my plan truly began. But here's where the story takes a darker turn, because the very next morning, something happened that tested my resolve in ways I never imagined. Claire burst into my study without knocking, holding an envelope. Her eyes glittered, not with tears this time, but with something colder. "Sign this, or you'll regret it," she said. And inside that envelope was something that could have destroyed everything. Claire slammed the envelope down on my desk with enough force to rattle the silver frame of Margaret's photograph. "Sign it," she demanded, her manicured finger tapping the paper inside. "You'll regret it if you don't." I leaned back in my chair, forcing my breath to remain calm. "What exactly am I signing, Claire?" Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "A transfer of ownership, the mansion, to Daniel and me, permanently." My chest tightened, not from fear, but from disgust. The audacity, the arrogance. "Claire," I said slowly, You do realize whose name is still on the deed. She rolled her eyes. Please, you're old. You're weak. The house is already ours in practice. Why drag it out? Daniel agrees. Sign it, and we'll take care of you. Take care of me. The words were sharp, cruel, as if I were a burden, a dying pet they were waiting to put down. I didn't sign. Instead, I smiled the way Margaret used to when she caught Daniel sneaking cookies from the jar. Calm, patient, waiting. Claire, I said, sliding the envelope back toward her. I'll think about it. Her eyes narrowed, but she snatched it up and stormed out, her heels clicking against the marble like hammers on nails. The moment she left, I opened my drawer and pulled out the folder. The real contract, the one that would strip everything from their greedy hands. I ran my thumb along the embossed seal of the law firm, feeling the power it held. They wanted the house. They were already living in it, parading it like a trophy, but they didn't know the clock was ticking. The days that followed were filled with small humiliations. Claire hosted parties, laughing loudly as she told her friends, "One day this house will be mine," just waiting for the old man to croak, "Daniel, my son." He didn't stop her. Sometimes I caught him chuckling along, a beer in hand, forgetting all the sacrifices I'd made. And my grandson Ethan, he sat quietly in the corner, his young eyes darting toward me with confusion. He didn't understand why his mother and father treated me like furniture. He only knew that something was wrong. That boy was the only reason I kept my silence. He still hugged me good night. He still whispered, "I love you, Grandpa." And I didn't want him to see the storm I was preparing. But storms don't wait forever. One morning, as the sun spilled through the curtains, my phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. "Mr. Harding," he said, his voice brisk. "The buyers are ready. Closing is in 2 weeks. They'll want access to the property soon for inspections." I glanced toward the hallway where Claire's laughter echoed, and Daniel's footsteps followed. 2 weeks. That was all the time I had to prepare for the reckoning. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. Because before those 2 weeks were up, an unexpected visitor arrived at the mansion, one who would change the course of everything. I still remember the knock on the heavy oak door, slow, firm. When I opened it, a woman stood there in a tailored suit, holding a briefcase. "Mr. Harding?" she asked. "My name is Evelyn Ross. I represent someone very interested in this property." I frowned. "It's already sold." Her smile was polite, but her eyes glinted with something sharper. "Oh, I know. But the person I represent has a personal connection to your family, and they're willing to pay double the offer." Double. The word crashed into my thoughts like thunder. But what stunned me even more was the name she whispered next. It was someone I never expected to hear again, someone from my past. And with that name, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about secrets, deep ones, that Claire and Daniel had no idea were about to be exposed. The name Evelyn, whispered, froze me in place. It wasn't just a name, it was a ghost. "Richard Cole," she said softly, as if testing my reaction. My pulse quickened. Richard, my old business partner, my closest friend, until greed tore us apart 20 years ago. We hadn't spoken since, and now he wanted my mansion. "Why?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. Evelyn opened her briefcase, laying out pristine documents on the foyer table. "Mr. Cole believes this property rightfully belongs to him. He claims certain investments made decades ago went unpaid. He's willing to resolve the matter by purchasing the mansion outright. Cash, double the current deal." I swallowed hard, my hand tightening around the edge of the table. I remembered those years well. Margaret and I had poured everything into saving my construction business. Richard had helped at times, yes, but every penny was repaid, or so I thought. This wasn't about money. This was about revenge. And I wasn't about to let another man steal what I had built, especially not when my own son and his wife were already trying to strip me of it. "I appreciate your client's interest," I said, steadying my tone. "But the house is already sold, legally binding. Nothing further to discuss." Evelyn tilted her head, studying me. "Then I'll leave you with this, Mr. Harding. Richard doesn't take no for an answer. He'll see you again, very soon." She gathered her papers, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she disappeared out the front door. That night, as the grandfather clock ticked in the study, I sat staring at Margaret's picture again. My late wife's gentle smile seemed to whisper, "Stand your ground, Henry. Don't let them take it." But it wasn't just Richard Cole I had to worry about. Claire had been snooping. I noticed it in the way she lingered near my study door, her ear pressed just long enough to catch fragments of conversation. And Daniel, my son, his eyes had started to change. Shifty, guilty, as if he knew something but was too weak to admit it. I knew then that the walls were closing in. 2 nights later, it happened. I was walking past the kitchen when I heard whispers, Claire's sharp voice cutting through the dark. "He hasn't signed anything yet," she hissed. "But I'll get it out of him. I don't care what it takes." Daniel murmured something I couldn't catch, and then Claire's tone turned venomous. "If he sells this place before we lock it down, we're finished. Do you understand? Finished. That money is ours. Ours." The word burned. Not hers. Not Daniel's. Not yet. And that's when I realized Claire wasn't just greedy. She was desperate. The next morning, Ethan, my grandson, slipped into my study while his parents were out. His small hands clutched a folded piece of paper. "Grandpa," he whispered, "Mom and Dad were fighting again. I don't think they know I was listening." I took the paper, unfolding it carefully. Inside was a list, scribbled notes in Claire's handwriting. Sell house, force signature, move funds to private account. My heart thudded as I read. Ethan's eyes brimmed with confusion. "Grandpa, are they trying to steal from you?" I pulled him close, my hand on his shoulder. "Don't worry, Ethan. Grandpa has a plan." But even as I said it, my chest tightened. Because the storm was no longer on the horizon. It was here, and soon everything would explode. The storm broke on a Saturday morning. Claire was already furious before she even came down for breakfast. Her heels clattered against the stairs, her voice echoing through the hall. "Daniel," she snapped, "your father needs to make a decision today. No more waiting." She stormed into the dining room, her silk robe dragging across the marble floor like a queen marching to war. Daniel followed, bleary-eyed, clutching his coffee mug, looking more like a servant than a husband. I sat at the head of the table, the spot that once meant respect. Now it was just a front-row seat to my own humiliation. Claire slapped a new stack of papers in front of me. "Sign. Today." I raised an eyebrow. "And if I don't?" Her smile was pure venom. "Then you'll find yourself out on the street faster than you can blink. Nursing homes love people like you, Henry. We'll see how far your pride gets you there." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, muttering, "Claire, maybe." "Quiet," she snapped. "This is about survival." Before I could answer, the heavy knock came at the door again. 3 raps, firm, familiar. Ethan, sitting quietly at the end of the table, looked up, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. I rose slowly, my bones aching, and pulled open the door. And there he was. Richard Cole, 20 years older, his once black hair now silver, but his eyes still cold, sharp, unforgiving. Beside him stood Evelyn, her briefcase at the ready. "Well, Henry," Richard said smoothly, "looks like you've still got a knack for drama." Behind me, Claire appeared, her eyes lighting up with a mixture of curiosity and greed. "Who's this?" Richard stepped inside, without waiting for an invitation, his presence filling the room like smoke. "An old friend," he said, though his smirk carried nothing but disdain, "and a man who intends to reclaim what's his." We sat in the living room, Claire perched on the arm of Daniel's chair, her eyes darting between us like a spectator at a boxing match. Richard placed a folder on the coffee table. "I have proof," he said. "Proof that I funded the foundation of this house. Proof that without me, this place wouldn't exist. And now, I've come to take what I'm owed." I kept my face calm, though my pulse raced. "You and I settled everything years ago. Not according to these documents." He slid the folder across the table. Claire's hand shot out before I could stop her, flipping it open, her eyes scanning eagerly. Her lips parted in a greedy smile. "Daniel, do you know what this means?" "We could," Richard cut her off. "Don't misunderstand me, Mrs. Harding. If this house changes hands, it won't be to you. It'll be to me." The room went dead silent. Daniel finally spoke, his voice cracking. "So, you're saying my father never really owned it?" Richard's smirk widened. "That's exactly what I'm saying." I clenched my fists under the table. This was no longer just about Claire's greed. Richard was here to rewrite history, to erase everything Margaret and I had built. And yet, I had something Richard didn't know. Something neither Claire nor Daniel suspected. I leaned back, letting silence hang heavy in the room. Then I said it, slow and deliberate. You should all be very careful about what you assume, because the mansion you're sitting in, it's already sold. The words struck like lightning. Claire gasped. Daniel's coffee cup slipped from his hands and shattered on the floor. And even Richard's smirk faltered. Sold? Richard spat. To who? I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. To someone who understands its true value. Someone who won't let vultures pick it apart. Richard leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. Who, Henry? Who did you sell it to? I let the silence stretch, savoring the tension, before answering. That's for me to know, and for all of you to find out. The room boiled with tension after I dropped the truth like a stone into still water. Claire shot up from Daniel's chair, her face twisted in disbelief. Sold? What do you mean sold? This is our house. I looked at her calmly. Correction, it was my house. And now, it belongs to someone else. Daniel's face turned pale. Dad, you can't be serious. Richard, however, only chuckled darkly, folding his arms across his chest. This is a bluff. Henry's always been dramatic. He's trying to scare you, but my silence, my steady gaze, told them it wasn't a bluff at all. Claire lunged for the folder Richard had brought, flipping through the documents with shaking hands. Show me proof. He can't just— But her desperation only revealed what I already knew. She had no claim, no control, no real power. All she had were threats and illusions. 2 days later, the truth began to surface. The buyer sent an inspector to the property. A tall man in a neat suit, walking through the hallways with a clipboard, making notes about the marble floors, the Italian chandelier, the sprawling gardens outside. Claire followed him like a shadow, her voice shrill. Who sent you? Who bought this place? Tell me right now. The inspector smiled politely, but said nothing. You'll know soon enough, ma'am. She stormed back into the dining room where I sat with my tea, her cheeks flushed with rage. Tell me who bought this house, Henry. You can't do this to us. You can't just sell it out from under us. I set my cup down gently, the porcelain clinking against the saucer. You made one mistake, Claire. You thought I was powerless. Her lips trembled with fury. If you ruin us, you'll regret it. I swear. I cut her off. No, Claire. If anything, I regret letting you and Daniel treat me like a tenant in my own home for as long as I did. Her eyes burned with hatred, but before she could retort, Ethan stepped quietly into the room. His small voice trembled. Mom, Grandpa's not the bad guy. Claire spun around, her jaw dropping. Ethan, stay out of this. But Ethan's eyes, so much like Margaret's, held firm. I heard you, Mom. I know what you and Dad said. You wanted to steal from him. The silence that followed was deafening. Later that evening, the phone rang. It was Evelyn, the lawyer who represented Richard. Mr. Harding, she said smoothly, my client would like to make one final offer before your sale closes. 3 times the current value. Cash. Immediate transfer. My grip tightened on the receiver. 3 times. Enough money to buy 10 houses. Enough to live out the rest of my life in absolute comfort. But this wasn't about money anymore. This was about principle. About Margaret's memory. About Ethan, who still believed in me when no one else did. So I answered in the calmest voice I could muster. Tell your client, no. There was silence on the other end. Then Evelyn's voice hardened. Then Mr. Cole will ruin you. I hung up before she could say more. The next morning, Richard himself returned. He barged into the mansion with a storm in his eyes, his voice booming through the halls. You think you can outplay me, Henry? You think you can humiliate me after all these years? I will take everything from you, Claire, ever the opportunist, latched onto his arm like a snake. Mr. Cole, maybe we can work together, Daniel and I. But Richard shoved her aside with a sneer. I don't need your help. You're nothing but leeches feeding off an old man's scraps. Her face flushed crimson, her eyes blazing with humiliation. And at that moment, I knew Richard had just made his greatest mistake. Because when Claire's pride was wounded, she turned on anyone, friend or foe, And now, she would turn on him. Richard's cruel dismissal left Claire trembling with rage. Her pride, her carefully polished image had been shattered in front of everyone. She stood there in the grand hall, her diamond bracelet catching the chandelier's glow. But her eyes were fire. "You'll regret that," she hissed, her voice trembling. "No one humiliates me." Richard only laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "I've built empires, Mrs. Harding. You married into one. Don't forget your place." Daniel shifted uncomfortably beside her, torn between his wife's fury and his old mentor's authority. He looked like a child caught between two arguing parents, too weak to speak, too afraid to act. And I sat back watching, because the cracks were forming, and all I had to do was let them widen. That evening, I found Claire in the study, rifling through my drawers. "Looking for something?" I asked. She spun around, her eyes wide. For the first time in a long time, she looked nervous, desperate. "You don't understand," she said quickly, lowering her voice. "Richard isn't just after the house. He wants everything. Your name, your legacy, your reputation. He'll destroy you." I leaned against the doorway. "And why should I believe you?" Her lips parted, searching for an answer. Finally she whispered, "Because if he takes you down, he'll take us down too. And I can't let that happen." Her confession was more revealing than she realized. The predator was afraid of a bigger predator. "Then perhaps," I said softly, "you and I aren't enemies after all." But Daniel wasn't ready for that truth. Later, I found him pacing the garden, his hands buried in his hair. "Dad, what are you doing? Selling the house? Cutting deals? Dragging Richard back into our lives? It's madness." I stepped closer, searching his face for the boy I used to know.
"Daniel, this house was never meant to be a prize for anyone. Not for Claire, not for Richard, not even for you. It was meant to be a home, but you forgot that."
He looked at me then, really looked at me, his eyes glassy. "I just wanted to give Claire the life she wanted. I thought I was doing the right thing." My voice cracked. "And in the process, you lost yourself, son." His shoulders sagged, but before he could answer, headlights swept across the driveway. A sleek black car pulled up, its engine humming like a predator at rest. The buyer had arrived. We gathered in the grand foyer. As the driver opened the rear door, out stepped a woman in her 50s, poised, elegant, with eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Harding," she said warmly, extending her hand. "It's been a long time." My breath caught, because I knew that face. It was Margaret's sister, Evelyn, my late wife's estranged sibling, the one who had vanished years ago after a bitter family feud over inheritance. And now, she was the secret buyer. Claire gasped, clutching Daniel's arm. "What is she doing here?" Richard's face drained of color. "Impossible," he muttered. "I made sure she was—" He stopped himself, but the slip was enough. Evelyn's smile was calm, deliberate. "You didn't think I'd stay gone forever, did you, Richard? Or that I wouldn't protect my sister's memory when I saw what had become of this house?" The room went still. For years, this mansion had been a battlefield of greed. But with Evelyn's arrival, the war had entered a new phase, one none of us could predict. The silence after Evelyn's words was suffocating. Claire's eyes darted from me to Evelyn, her voice cracking like glass. You can't do this. You can't just walk in and take what's ours." Evelyn's calm gaze pinned her in place. "What's yours? You married into wealth, Claire. But this house, this legacy, was built by my sister and Henry. Margaret's memory lives in every stone, every wall. And I won't watch it rot under your greed." At the mention of Margaret, my chest tightened. For the first time in years, someone had spoken of her with reverence, instead of as a bargaining chip. Richard, however, was not moved. He slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming through the hall. "This is ridiculous. Evelyn, you have no claim. I invested in this house, long before you showed your face again. If anyone deserves it, it's me." Evelyn tilted her head, her eyes cold. "Funny you should say that, Richard, because I brought proof." She opened her briefcase, sliding a bundle of papers across the table. Deeds, receipts, bank transfers, evidence that not only had Richard's supposed investment been repaid decades ago, but that he had, in fact, siphoned money from the company behind my back. The color drained from Richard's face. You You set me up, he stammered. No, Evelyn corrected smoothly. You set yourself up. I simply kept the records. Claire pounced on the moment like a vulture, turning to Richard with venom. So all this time, you were lying? You don't own anything. You're nothing but a thief. Richard's composure snapped. He lunged for the documents, but Daniel stepped between them. For once, my son's voice was firm. Enough, he shouted. I don't care who owns what anymore. All I know is this house has torn our family apart. His words struck the air like a bell. Ethan, who had been standing quietly in the corner, finally spoke up. His small voice wavered, but it carried more weight than any of ours. Dad, he said, Grandpa's the only one who ever made this house feel like home. You and Mom just made it scary. Daniel froze. The truth from his own son hit harder than any accusation I could make. Richard, furious and desperate, tried one last play. He grabbed the folder of documents and shouted, I'll sue all of you. I'll drag this into court until there's nothing left. But Evelyn only smiled faintly. Go ahead. Every page in that folder is a nail in your coffin. By the time the truth comes out, you'll have nothing left but your bitterness. For the first time, Richard looked small, shrunken, defeated. He dropped the folder onto the floor and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The echo of his departure lingered in the marble halls, heavy and final. But the war wasn't over, because now the focus shifted to Evelyn and her true intentions. She looked at me, her eyes softening. Henry, I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to honor my sister. Margaret wanted this house to be a place of love, and I intend to make it that way again. Claire laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. So what, you'll just move in? Kick us all out? That's your grand plan? Evelyn's smile didn't falter. Not exactly. My plan is far more poetic. She leaned forward, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. I'm not taking this house from you, Claire. I'm giving you a choice. Stay here under my conditions, or leave with nothing. The room froze again. Claire's face paled, Daniel's jaw clenched, and Ethan's wide eyes filled with questions. And I knew then, Evelyn wasn't just here to save the house. She was here to test us all. The weight of Evelyn's words hung in the air like thunder. Claire was the first to break the silence, her voice rising into a shrill laugh. Conditions? You think you can walk in here, wave a few papers around, and dictate how we live? This is our life, our family. Evelyn's voice cut her off, calm but commanding. Your family? No, Claire, this house doesn't belong to you. You've treated it like a trophy, not a home, and Margaret would never forgive me if I let that continue. The mention of Margaret's name silenced Claire instantly. Even Daniel lowered his head, guilt flickering across his face. I swallowed hard. For years, I had kept Margaret's memory alive silently, quietly, through photos and whispered prayers. Hearing Evelyn speak her name aloud with reverence and strength, it felt like Margaret herself was standing beside me. What are these conditions? I asked softly. Evelyn's eyes met mine. Simple. Daniel and Claire can remain here, but only if they contribute. No more freeloading. No more treating you like an unwanted guest. They will pay rent, they will maintain the property, and they will treat you, Henry, with respect. If they cannot do that, they leave, immediately. Daniel blinked as if slapped. Pay rent? In my own house? Your father's house, Evelyn corrected firmly. And soon mine. You've mistaken generosity for entitlement, Daniel. That ends today. Claire scoffed, her face red with fury. This is absurd. You expect us to bow down like servants in our own home? Evelyn's smile was razor sharp. Not servants, family. If you can't handle that, then yes, you leave, with nothing. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by Ethan's quiet voice. I like Evelyn's rules, he said timidly, glancing at me. It would mean we all get along, right? His innocence pierced the tension like sunlight through storm clouds. Daniel's shoulders slumped, shame washing over his face. Maybe she's right, Claire. Maybe we've gone too far. But Claire's eyes blazed with defiance. Too far? Daniel? She's trying to control us. She's trying to humiliate us. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw something raw beneath her arrogance. Fear. Fear of losing everything she had clawed for. That night, the house was restless. Daniel avoided me, pacing the halls. Claire locked herself in the bedroom, her muffled sobs carrying through the walls. Ethan found me in the study, curling up beside me on the old leather chair. "Grandpa," he whispered, "will we have to leave?" I stroked his hair gently. "No, Ethan, not you. No matter what happens, you'll always have a home with me." His small hand squeezed mine, and I felt Margaret's presence again, as if she were reminding me why I had endured so much. This wasn't just about the house. It was about family, about teaching my son what it meant to be a man, a husband, a father, about showing Claire that love, not greed, was the only foundation worth building on. But as I sat there in the quiet, I couldn't shake the gnawing thought. Would Claire ever accept those conditions? Or would she rather burn everything down than admit defeat? And the answer came sooner than I expected, because the very next morning, I woke to the sound of raised voices, Claire's shrill scream, Daniel's desperate pleas, and the unmistakable crash of something shattering in the foyer. When I rushed down the stairs, I saw it. Claire had packed her suitcases, and in her hands she held a weapon I never expected, something that could undo everything Evelyn and I had fought for. The foyer looked like a battlefield. Suitcases lay scattered across the marble floor, clothes spilling from them like entrails. Claire stood at the center, her face pale but furious, gripping a thick envelope in her manicured hands. Daniel hovered beside her, torn between stopping her and stepping aside. Ethan peeked from the top of the staircase, his little hands gripping the banister, eyes wide with fear. "What are you doing, Claire?" I asked, my voice steady but low. Her lips curled into a smile that was equal parts triumph and venom. "Leaving, but not before I take what I'm owed." She held up the envelope and shook it. Papers slid slightly free, revealing legal seals and signatures. "What's that?" Daniel asked, his voice breaking. Claire's eyes glittered. "Insurance. Proof that your father isn't the saint he pretends to be. Proof that could ruin him." The room went deathly silent. Evelyn, who had just entered, froze. "What do you mean, proof?" Claire's smile widened. "I found old documents in the study. Deals your precious Henry made years ago. Shady ones. If I take these to Richard or the press or anyone who will listen, this house, this legacy, everything will be dragged through the mud. His reputation will be destroyed." My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to stay calm. I knew exactly what she'd found. Papers from a construction project decades ago, where Richard had manipulated the books to cover his theft. On paper, though, my name was tied to those numbers. It wasn't the full truth, but in the wrong hands, it could be twisted into something ugly. Ethan gasped from the stairs. "Mom, why would you hurt Grandpa?" For just a flicker of a moment, guilt crossed her face. But then it hardened into resolve. "Because, Ethan," she snapped, "sometimes you have to fight for what you deserve." Evelyn stepped forward, her eyes sharp as ice. "You think blackmail will save you? You're more desperate than I thought." Claire laughed bitterly. "Call it whatever you want, but unless Henry hands this house over, I'll make sure the world knows who he really is." Daniel finally exploded. "Claire, stop! This isn't you!" She rounded on him, her voice cracking. "Isn't me? Daniel, open your eyes. Without this house, without money, what are we? Nothing. I won't go back to scraping by. I won't." Her words echoed through the grand halls, ugly and raw. I took a slow breath. "Claire, you've already lost. You just don't see it yet. That envelope doesn't hold the truth. It holds Richard's lies. And if you use it, you won't just hurt me. You'll destroy your own family." For the first time, Claire hesitated. Her hands shook, the envelope trembling in her grip. Daniel reached for her, his voice soft now. "Claire, please, put it down. Don't do this." But Claire's eyes darted to me, full of fury and fear. "If I can't have this house, no one will." And with that, she ripped the envelope open. Papers scattered across the air, fluttering like broken wings. Proof, lies, secrets, all tumbling to the floor. And in that moment, everything changed. Because Ethan, little Ethan, ran down the stairs, gathered the papers into his arms, and looked straight at his mother. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling but strong, "I don't want your money. I just want my family back." The room went silent. Claire's face crumpled, torn between rage and heartbreak. Evelyn watched quietly, her sharpness softening for the first time. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. And me, I felt Margaret's presence again, as if she were whispering through our grandson's voice. Maybe this house wasn't meant to be a curse after all. Maybe it was meant to be the place where truth finally broke free. But the battle wasn't finished yet, because the front doors slammed open, and Richard walked back in, his eyes gleaming like a wolf who had been waiting for this very moment. The oak doors slammed so hard the chandelier trembled. Richard strode in like a storm, his silver hair slicked back, his eyes sharp and merciless. The scattered papers at Claire's feet caught his attention, and a cruel smile stretched across his face. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Looks like the truth finally crawled out of the shadows." Claire's face went pale. "Richard," he cut her off with a raised hand. "Spare me. You've done my work for me. Those documents tie Henry to every shady deal I ever made, and now they're mine." He bent down, snatching a handful of papers from the floor. Ethan clutched the rest tightly to his chest, his small body trembling. "Give them to me, boy," Richard ordered, his voice low and dangerous. I stepped forward, placing myself between Richard and Ethan. "You'll have to go through me first." Richard's smirk widened. "Gladly." The tension snapped like a whip. Claire backed away, realizing too late the monster she had invited into her home. Daniel looked frozen, torn between loyalty to me and fear of Richard's power. Evelyn, calm as ever, watched like a strategist waiting for the perfect move. Richard straightened the papers in his hands and waved them like a weapon. "You see, Henry, I don't need the deed anymore. With this, I'll ruin you in court, in the press, in the eyes of everyone who thought you were a decent man. This mansion will be mine by default." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I forced my voice to stay calm. "You've forgotten one thing, Richard." His eyes narrowed. "And what's that?" I nodded toward Evelyn. "You're not the only one who kept records." Evelyn's briefcase clicked open. She laid out her own set of documents on the table. Thick, bound, stamped with official seals. "While you were busy covering your tracks, Richard," she said smoothly, "I was busy keeping them. Every theft, every false invoice, every dime you siphoned from the company Henry built. You think these papers damn him? No, they damn you." Richard's face turned a dangerous shade of red. "Lies," he spat. "All of it." But Evelyn slid a final page across the table. "This isn't a lie. It's a signed affidavit from one of your former accountants, the same one you threatened 20 years ago. He's ready to testify." The room fell silent. For the first time, Richard's mask cracked. His hands shook and the papers he held slipped through his fingers, scattering back onto the floor like fallen leaves. Claire seized the moment, stepping forward with trembling defiance. "So all this time you used me. You made me think I could win, but you were just using me to get to Henry." Richard's voice cracked with rage. "You were too greedy to see it, woman." Daniel stepped forward at last, his voice strong. "That's enough, Richard. Get out of my father's house." Richard spun toward him, his teeth clenched. "Your father's house? No, Daniel. This house has always been mine." But even as he shouted, the sound rang hollow. He was a wolf who had finally lost his bite. I stepped closer, staring him down. "No, Richard, this house was Margaret's, and she built it with love, not lies. That's why you'll never have it." For the first time in years, Richard looked small, beaten, alone. He glared at Evelyn, then at me, then at Claire, who was no longer on his side. Finally, with a strangled curse, he turned and stormed out into the night, slamming the door behind him. The echo of his defeat lingered, heavy and final. But even with Richard gone, the room was far from calm. Claire stood trembling, her eyes darting between Daniel, Evelyn, and me. "So, what happens now?" she whispered. Evelyn's gaze was steady, her voice measured. "Now, Claire, you decide. You either live under my conditions, or you walk away forever." Claire's lips trembled. Daniel reached for her hand, but she pulled away, her pride battling her fear. And upstairs, Ethan's small voice broke the silence again. "Please, Mom, don't leave us." Claire's shoulders shook. For the first time, her mask cracked, and tears spilled down her cheeks. But whether those tears meant surrender or one last desperate act remained to be seen. Claire's tears glistened under the chandelier, but her silence was heavier than any scream. Daniel reached for her again, his voice low, pleading. Claire, it doesn't have to end like this. We can stay. We can make it right. For Ethan. For us. Her eyes flicked to him, then to me, then to Evelyn. A storm brewed in her expression. Fear, shame, pride, all tangled together. Finally, she whispered, "You don't know what it's like growing up with nothing. Always begging, always scraping by. I swore I'd never live like that again. This house, this life, it was supposed to be my safety." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw not just the greed in her, but the wound that had fed it. Evelyn's tone softened, though her eyes remained sharp. Safety built on lies is no safety at all, Claire. You've poisoned yourself chasing something that was never yours to begin with. Claire covered her face with trembling hands. Ethan tugged at her robe, his small voice fragile. "Mom, I don't care about the house. I just want you to be happy again." The words broke her. Her shoulders shook with sobs as Daniel pulled her into his arms. For once, she didn't resist. Evelyn closed her briefcase with a soft click. "Then it's settled. You stay on my terms. Pay your way. Treat Henry with the respect he deserves. Or you go, and the doors close behind you forever." Daniel nodded quickly. "We'll stay. I'll make it work. I promise." All eyes turned to Claire. She looked at me, her expression raw, stripped of arrogance. "Henry, I've treated you terribly. I can't change what I said, what I did. But, if you'll allow it, I'll try to do better. For Ethan, for Daniel, for this family." I studied her for a long moment. The old anger simmered, but beneath it, I saw something different. Sincerity. Fragile, but real. Margaret's voice echoed in my heart. "Be patient, Henry. People can change if they choose to." I gave a single nod. "Then prove it, Claire. Not with words, but with time." Her tearful nod was the closest thing to humility I'd ever seen from her. The weeks that followed were strange. The house grew quieter. No more lavish parties. No more cruel laughter at my expense. Daniel found work managing one of Evelyn's properties. Humbled but determined. Claire, to my surprise, began volunteering at Ethan's school. Her sharp edges softening little by little. Ethan laughed more. That was all I needed. As for Richard, he disappeared into the shadows he'd created for himself. Evelyn assured me the legal noose around his neck was tightening. He'd spend the rest of his life fighting battles he could never win. Justice at last. One crisp evening, I stood on the balcony overlooking the gardens. Ethan ran across the lawn, his laughter ringing out like music. Daniel and Claire sat on the steps watching him together. Evelyn joined me, her hands folded neatly. "Margaret would be proud," she said softly. My throat tightened. "I hope so." "She would," Evelyn said firmly. "Because you didn't just save a house, Henry. You saved a family." For the first time in years, I felt peace settle over me. The mansion wasn't just stone and wood. It was memory, love, legacy, and now, perhaps, it could be reborn. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered to the night, to Margaret, to anyone listening, "You were right, my love. Patience wins in the end." And with that, I finally let the weight of the past slip away. So friends, remember this. Wealth can be stolen. Houses can be sold. But respect and love must be earned every single day. Don't let pride blind you to what truly matters. If you found this story moving, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments what would you have done in my place.